We don't often get judicial candidates on the show because it's difficult as a judicial candidate to engage in a campaign. You can't be as, freewheeling as some of the other positions. You have to be a little more circumspect with how you communicate. So I am always thrilled when we can actually speak with judicial candidates for office. Talk with us about what it is about your life story that made you think, you know what, after doing all this, raising some kids, going to law school, doing all the things that I skipped a bunch of stuff in the bio, but what is it about your life experience that made you realize this was a calling that you had to answer, this candidacy for judge in this position?
Absolutely. So for one, being a judge, being an attorney was actually nothing I ever imagined doing. Hence the math degree. I'm completely math science. I was supposed to be a doctor.
Wow. Same, but I didn't have a math degree to prove it.
So through some other loops and hoops, the roller coaster of life, do like this, and then you land. I went to law school. During law school is where I realized I really love criminal law and family law, and that's where I wanted to kind of focus. I thought that was the most rewarding areas. Now I am just criminal defense, and just being in this practice, being in these courts every day, in my county anyways. And we know who's at court. You can walk through any court, just walk in the building and go down the hall, who's in criminal court, and they're not met with anybody that looks like them, anybody. And so the representation it's completely lacking here in Tarrant County. And that was really my number one reason, is everybody deserves somebody that can represent them, that can understand them, that knows where they come from, that knows their upbringing, their background, circumstances, because cultures are different. People do different things in different cultures. And so it's important that the person who is making decisions over people's lives, everyday lives, can know and understand them. And even if they can't, you can hop off the bench and go and talk to another judge who could. We don't even have that as an option in Tarrant County.
Wow. Talk to us about the judiciary. Actually, let's talk about the demographics of your county, and then let's talk about how those demographics are or are not reflected in the judiciary, particularly for the criminal court. Are we talking about a sizable Black population in Tarrant County? What do the demographics look like?
So our county is 2.1 million people. We are the 11th largest county in the country. Our population is very diverse, with African Americans being at least 33% of the population.
Wow.
And then we have a whole host of other nationalities: Asian Americans, Mexican Americans, this is a huge melting pot here in Tarrant County. Our judiciary, county-wide seats, there are 58 courts that serves the entire county in different capacities: criminal courts, family courts, civil court, probate courts. Out of those 58 courts, there are no African-American women on any one of those 58 courts. In terms of diversity, we have 2 African-American men, 2 Latino men, 1 Latina and the Latina is on a bench that's not even elected, it's an appointed seat. Wow. 5 diverse judges out of 58 courts.
In a county that's got at least a third Black population. Whew, okay, so we see that says a lot, and oh, Lord help us. So when it comes to your candidacy, is there a diverse pool of candidates who are running, or are you seeing more diversity reflected within the candidates pool for folks who are of the group that people will be choosing from when they get to the polls?
Yes, and this is a new thing. So in Tarrant County, and I'm running as a Democrat. Unfortunately, judicial seats have to be partisan, even though the role of a judge is to be impartial.
Right.
We'll digress.
That's a whole other show segment, but one that we should actually dive into at some point. Thank you for that suggestion.
The goal, I'm sorry, what was your question again? What was
are you seeing diversity within the other candidates? So are we hoping that even if you are, as you are running, are there other judges who look like you or who reflect that diversity who are also seeking office?
Yes. So in the past 2 election cycles, we've seen more diverse candidates, and it's really hard for a candidate to run. It's a huge sacrifice. There has not been a Democrat elected in Tarrant County in over 30 years. And so that is discouraging when you think about putting your all on the line, it's a lot of work that goes into this. But over the past 2 cycles, we have seen more diverse candidates run. The last cycle, we did not get any elected, but we came within that less than 5% range. So we're getting there. And in this cycle, we actually are going to have a fantabulous slate. And I'd have to say fantabulous because we have 8 dynamic Black women running for different seats. So
wow.
4 for countywide judgeships, and these are different seats. 1 for the county judge, which is like the mayor of the county, 1 for a seat on commissioner's court, 1 for justice of the peace. And I know I'm leaving out someone, and I really apologize, but I know there's 8 Black women that will be on our ballot for Tarrant County positions on this November 2022.
Now, that one makes my heart really, really glad. I feel like I've seen some of y'all's, some social media dedicated to memeing how significant this is. And I've seen, images of like, there's 4 over here, 4 over here. A number of you are part of Divine 9 organization. So It's got like the friendly rivalry there as well. I absolutely love that. Now, as a judicial candidate, obviously there are limits about what you can discuss. And again, I say that for people who don't know, your candidacy doesn't show up the same way as a candidate for Congress or a state representative. There are different rules about what judges can do, which in some ways makes sense because you don't want your judge, out there on the campaign trail talking about, I can't stand the Black, you wouldn't want that.
Exactly.
That's how they plan on actually, engaging with the law. But it would have a really negative effect on the public's ability to have whatever confidence we're able to scrape together to have in our court. So it makes sense. But within the bounds that you were sort of allowed to operate, talk with us about some of the issues that really show up for you that are part of driving the engine that's driving your campaign.
So yes, running as a judicial candidate is very hard because we have way more strict rules than anybody else. And one of those is not being able to talk about issue-based questions. And obviously people want to know, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? And our lips are tied because we can't make, because it's almost like deciding a case before you see the case. You never know if that issue is some way going to be intertwined in a case that could come before you. And so you don't want to be on record saying, oh, I feel this way about an issue. And then that case come and the people before you're going to think, oh, she's already decided because she said.
Right. And they'll ask you to recuse yourself. You would not even be able to participate in that case. They'd be like, well, I heard you on that show with that girl with all that big hair. And you was like, So
exactly. So that is one of the struggles, but also because of that, because people want to know, what are you going to do for me? What am I going to see happen? And so for me as a judge, my role and my goal is just to ensure that there's fairness across the board. So that's in sentencing, that's in programs, that's in opportunities, that's in resources that's available to an individual through the court. That also comes with education. So that will be a big proponent in my courtroom. I want to make sure that everybody is knowledgeable about what could be available to them. And if they fit in this bucket, this could be available to you. If this is your situation, this could be available to you. And that's going to come through education. But just making sure that there's not disparities when it comes to sentencing, and especially the disparities that people generally see when it comes to nationalities. We want to make sure that we're taking a look at everything that comes across the bench, including warrants, bond conditions, people that are just sitting in jail. Why are they still sitting there? Is this low level nonviolent? Is this something like, are we wasting jail resources for a person that could just be out on bond waiting for their court date? So those are the goals that I have for my seat.
It sounds like you have a human-driven campaign, one where you are thinking about, defendants and thinking about, the process and the system that is available to them. And again, I like to remind people, defendants are not convicted, right? So defendants are innocent until proven guilty. And it also sounds as though you have a bit of sensitivity to the impact that criminal acts can have within a community. And so being able to balance that is really important. When I was a teenager, I appeared in front of a judge, and it was not for a protest. I appeared in front of a judge who was gracious enough and human-centered enough to recognize that I was making some dumb young decisions. And instead of throwing the book at me, which they could have, because I wasn't always sitting behind this microphone. you've got some kids who's a little wayward, just know it can get better. Like, it can work out. But that judge was able to allow me access to diversion programs and made sure that I did not end up with a permanent record. You know, it was a record, but it wasn't permanent, because they were able to see me, and they were able to see my humanity. They were able to see that, yes, I had made some mistakes, but as Brian Stevenson, a brilliant attorney and one of my favorite law professors, always says, you are more than just the worst thing you've ever done.
That's
and
right.
I feel like it's so important to have members of the bar and members of the bench who are able to bring that sense of humanity with them. Can you talk with us about what it means to transition from defending and advocating on behalf of members of your clients, and then moving into a position where you will be deciding cases? How are you preparing to make that transition? Because we already speak in your successful victory into existence.
Claiming it.
Yes.
So I've actually been on both sides of the table. I was a former prosecutor and now a defense attorney. And I think in both of those roles, it is important to be able to see the whole case and to see it from all sides. So even as a defense attorney, I keep it real with my clients. Look, we need to be deciding how much time. Sometimes that's it. We need to be deciding how much time, because we're just not here. We're not going to get there. The case isn't going to get us there. And so I already have that realistic approach. And sometimes people don't hire me. I'm not going to sell you a ship. You know, I'm going to keep it real with you. And I was the same way as a prosecutor. If I saw a case that came through that was absolute garbage, I got rid of the case. I'm not pushing a case to try to prosecute it just to get a conviction because I can. No, if the case is bad, we're going to get rid of this case. And in the same way as a defense attorney, if the case is not in your favor, let's try to see how we can best work this out. That'll be a reasonable resolution for you, your life, and that way you can move forward. And so it would be no different as a judge. I would be looking at the whole case and making an accurate evaluation of the case, and then making a decision that would be most suitable for that person that's before me. Now, 97% of what comes before me is going to be plea deals. And so in that regard, that's more of me just making sure that those plea deals are not disparaging one way or another. And so I am committed to ensuring that I'm not just signing papers and reading the plea wording, going through the motions. Essentially, I want to make sure that what we're doing is the right thing and that it is going to be fair, according to the person that's there. So
I appreciate that, because sometimes we forget. The reality is, you know, I'd often said that I could not be a prosecutor. That just personally was something I could not do. But then once I went to law school, I realized I might be a better defense attorney if I did spend some time on the prosecution side, because that would allow me to see both angles and be able to really have a much clearer view as to how the system works, you know. And then I took a couple of cases, and I was like, criminal law is not going to be my bag. It's not where I am going to land. When I made my transition into private practice, I was exploring candidate Clayton. I was like, I could do some family law cases. And then I realized I have unresolved daddy issues. This is not going to work for me. This is not going to work. This is not going to work. I was much younger then. But I think there is such a role to be played by attorneys who do bring both sides of that position to the bench. And I think it's really important right now, particularly as we are seeing that there are a lot of eyes looking at our judges and the decisions that they're making and the rationales that motivate them. And for, the lay person, and I guess I'm including myself in that as a non-judge, for the lay person, it's really scary to think about how much power judges have over our lives. And so knowing that there is a slate of Black women candidates who are running to make sure that they're bringing those perspectives, those diverse perspectives into that field, I think that gives me a lot of comfort. What do you think your county would look like if you had judges who were operating with that human-driven approach, who had the wisdom and the insight of seeing both the prosecutorial side and the defense side? How would your county be different if you had more of that? And I'm going to take this away from you. So not saying that you would be this, but if you had more of that sense, we're going to keep your candidacy alive and well. Ain't nobody going to be able to point to the Lurie Daniel Favors Show and hem you up. What would the judiciary look like, and what would the community look like? What difference would it make if more of those 50 some odd judges that you mentioned, of whom there are no Black women currently, if they were operating from that type of perspective?
I think it definitely provides a broader view. And so it's not a one-track mind. If you've only done prosecution, then you have a prosecution brain. And prosecutors have enormous amount of resources. They are literally in control of everything. And so if they are set on, I want a conviction, I'm seeking a conviction, that's what we would consider a prosecution brain. Then when you flip to a defense attorney, you have to be the complete opposite. I know they want a conviction out of my client. I know they're trying to, get the most out of him, but I want to get what's best for him. And I think once you're able to, and have to, because you'll see a lot of prosecutors been career prosecutors that flip to the defense, and they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize. But right. Yeah, right. It is a lot harder to be the defense attorney, but it allows your brain to think differently about cases. And that's where we want that on the bench, is to be open-minded. You don't need to be sold one way or the other, but you need to be open to hear. You don't need to say, well, you're charged with this. Here's what this police report says, so that must have been it. No, you have to be open to hear what led up to that, what may have caused it, what was involved, where the person's mind state actually was, what was going on. You have to be open to hear that there possibly was a valuable reason for that happening. Even though that is a crime, there may be a logical reasoning for getting here. Right. So I think having both perspectives, it allows your mind to be open to, okay, well, let me wait and hear what the other side has to say, because there got to be something or we wouldn't be here, right?
We wouldn't be here. There are two sides, and it's important that we value hearing and allowing both sides, not just hearing from both sides, but making sure that both sides have an equitable opportunity to present their case, right? That would be one thing that would kill me. I'm like, you mean you get to wait to the last minute to give me evidence that could clear my client, and that's allowed? We got some funky rules in the New York City criminal courts, but
it was same rules in Texas. So
really,
I've gotten stuff in the middle of trial that the night, 2-week trial, I get stuff on a day, and that night I'm up all night digging through it, like, well, let me see what I can find and what I'm going to find in here.
Wow. It almost feels like, these are my words, not yours, kind of feels like the system's rigged, but let's move on. So we just have one more question for you. I really appreciate you sharing your time with us this morning. And actually, two questions. One, when is your election? So when can people right now, are you in primary, or I'm sorry, early voting? What are the logistics around this election? How can people make their voice heard?
Absolutely. So we just had the primary election March 1st. The general election day is going to be November the 8th. Early voting starts October 24th through November the 4th. Huge proponent of early voting, because you're going to wait to the election day. There's going to be lines wrapped around the building. Some people will get discouraged just by seeing the line, not want to wait, when it is so important. And we really try to stress you mentioned it, how much power judges have, but a lot of people don't understand that. They do not understand how important judges are. But yes, please vote early in those 2 weeks.